In this day and age where data is getting created at breakneck speed, you're always falling behind in your ability to keep up, right? So you're dealing with the data fire hose, both in terms of the volume but also the variety.
This week on Technado, we'll be talking with Shekhar from Clairvoyant. We've also got a lot of news to get to, including DNS Flag Day, that I know you're as excited for as I am. That's all coming up on Technado, starting right now. Hello and welcome to Technado. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and joined today, as always, by Mr. Don Pizzette over there. But we also have Ronnie Wong. This is the first time that we've gotten Ronnie Wong into the eye of the Technado, if you will. Ronnie, how are you doing today?
I am doing well, Peter. Thank you. I thought you were avoiding me on purpose, so it's great to be here.
Well, just because you're on doesn't mean we weren't avoiding you on purpose.
Yeah, I seem to be the only one that actually said yes today, so...
Yeah, you were the closest one.
No, yeah, I was right outside the door.
When Don walked out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a mistake. Everyone knows by now. Oh, it's Thursday afternoon or whatever day. We
stay away from
Don's
office. Yeah. Well, we've got a big day today. We've got some great articles. Not a lot of security stuff, which is nice for once. Not a lot of people were hacked this last week, or we don't know it yet.
Or we've been desensitized and don't care anymore.
Right.
Exactly.
Maybe more true.
Yeah, that could be an issue as well. But we also have a great interview coming up in a little bit with a company called Clairvoyant, so we'll get to that. But first, to the news. So our first article today, well, happy DNS Flag Day, everybody.
All right.
Preemptive.
Yes.
Yeah, it's coming up here and next week for us, 1st of February. But I guess the big question on my mind is, what is DNS Flag Day?
You know, if you had picked 10 people on the street a week ago and asked them that same question, you probably wouldn't have found a single person who could answer. And if you asked today, you'd probably get the same result.
If you asked in this room, I feel like you'd get, I don't know, 66% of people maybe, roughly.
Yeah, you know, DNS Flag Day, it's a big deal for some people. For most people, it's absolutely nothing. It's not a big deal at all. And I think what you'll find is that most people are never even going to learn about this, and it's going to come and go. But it is something to be aware of, especially if you're a sysadmin and you run your own DNS servers. There's some changes coming up to DNS. Now, we've been seeing just a few little news articles pop up. I didn't actually have a news article to reference today. We actually just have the DNSFlagDay.net website where they do a completely inadequate job of explaining what the problem is and just tell you really it's coming up. But they do have a nice little tool where you can check your domain to see if there's going to be a problem. What it boils down to is years and years ago, actually about decades ago now, they wanted to be able to extend DNS's functionality, but the DNS standard doesn't allow for that. So they created these little subheaders or extensions that they could put inside of a DNS query to be able to handle extra functionality. And these are things that power important stuff like DNSSEC and other technologies like that. You know, DNS wasn't designed to store encryption keys. Now it does, or at least public keys. So that functionality was added onto DNS. Modern DNS servers like Bind and Unbound and those guys, they'll see those extensions, they'll use them, they'll work with them, and that's it. Older DNS servers are supposed to ignore those options. But there were some DNS servers that would basically, if they saw a request that contained one of those options in it, would just not respond at all, would assume it was a malformed request. And so on February 1st, they're making a big change, which is they're no longer going to support servers that don't respond at all. It's okay to use the options. It's okay to ignore the options. But if you don't respond at all, it's going to flag your DNS server as not functioning, and clients will move on to a next DNS server in line. So it'll count as a DNS failure. And that's kind of a big deal. If you support your DNS servers, you need to check and just make sure that you've run an update in the last decade and you'll be fine. It's pretty far back that you get this broken functionality.
Well, they've got a fancy little tool here where you can test your domain, and I got to say, Don, I did. And I see minor problems detected.
You know, I got kind of annoyed with it. Did you run Technado? Or,
no, I ran ITProTV.
Yeah, I haven't run Technado yet, so I was just thinking about that one. But yeah, we could run ITPro.
Well,
if you run through the tool, it checks for these extensions, right? So the DNS server that's hosting this, now we use Amazon Route 53 for our DNS, and so that's fine. So it runs a test, and it says minor problems detected. Well, the minor problems detected for us have absolutely nothing to do with Flag Day, right? Or DNS Flag Day. Maybe they have to do with real Flag Day. But with us, the minor problem is that we don't have DNSSEC enabled for that domain, right? And so they're saying you should really consider configuring DNSSEC, but the fact that it's not configured is not a big deal. So it's a minor problem, and that's actually a totally separate thing. But as far as DNS flags, we're on Route 53. That stuff has always been up to date for the extensions, and so we're in business there. But yeah, you can check your site. It's pretty useful.
Well, then I feel less bad. Technado.com has the same minor problems.
Yeah, the interesting thing, that at least from when I was reading up a little bit about this, Don, is that I saw a few different blogs that were out there that pretty much, it was like an alarming, fact, like, hey, DNS Flag Day is coming. Are you prepared?
Winter is coming.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite amazing, the different quotes that they had from Flag Day, and it did. If you read just surface, the first few paragraphs, you thought like, hey, your DNS server is going to shut down on February 1st, is what you thought. So I kept reading, and then finally I said, Don, let me ask you about this a little bit more. And he's like, oh, well, it could, but probably not going to happen.
Let me give you one scenario where it might actually be an issue. And just for the record, I ran Microsoft.com. They've got minor problems as well. So it's big and small. If you have a firewall that's using DNS mask or a utility like that is intercepting DNS requests and proxying them, that type of a scenario there, your proxy is far more likely to choke on these extensions than a DNS server would. So the odds of your DNS server having a problem are pretty low. But if you've got something doing proxy DNS lookups, you might want to double check and just make sure it has support to handle that. Everything I've checked has. I actually couldn't find a broken example to do a demonstration. I was going to do a demo video to put out there, but I actually couldn't create a broken environment. So
fire up a new site that just host it somewhere.
I'd have to fire up like a really old copy of DNS. I guess I've got like old OpenBSD disks around somewhere. I could.
So now you have to find a disk drive.
Well, that's true. There's a whole new problem.
Can I tell you what confused me about Flag Day as well, DNS Flag Day here? If you go back to the site here, we've got at the very top, right next to the words DNS Flag Day, we've got 6 flags. Okay, those are for the translations. I get it now.
Well, but if you're not in one of those countries, you're obviously fine.
I guess that's what it is. And the first one is that the Czech Republic?
Is it?
It's it goes to CS is the abbreviation they're using.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that might be, but regardless, I don't know. The last one's Russian. I mean, they're the ones hoping you don't do this, so they can just get into your server.
Well, let's say for a moment you don't do this, right? You're not actually opening yourself up to attack or anything. Your DNS server is going to get flagged as being down, so it's not really something somebody could take advantage of. I guess maybe there could be some cache poisoning. There might be. There might be an attack vector there, but for most people, it's not even something that can be attacked.
Well, it is confirmed that is the Czech Republic's flag. So I'm bringing you all the hard-hitting news.
Good to know. I was
going to
be
here on Technado.
I was going to be up late tonight worrying about that.
That's the first one. For a second, I was like, is that Puerto Rico? But then there's Spain over there, so no, okay.
Are they alphabetized? No, because the U.S. is in the middle.
Maybe the person who made this is out there in the Czech Republic. Who knows?
Who knows?
It was maintained by DNS Violations. That's the name of their organization. Good for them. All right. Well, anyway, I'll get you something next week for DNS Flag Day because I didn't know. I didn't know it was coming. So presents will be here next week.
Yeah. Put it on your calendar.
Yeah. Our next article is over on Slashdot, and this is more one that hits home for me. Google proposes changes to Chromium browser that will break content blocking extensions, including various ad blockers. And I love how they're doing this under the guise of for safety and for speed, where we're talking about the largest advertiser on the internet these days, or the one that makes the most money from advertising at least, and this is going to help them out tremendously.
It's easy to be pessimistic on this and look at it as Google making some kind of power play, but there is actually some truth to this. we've reported a few times over the last few months, and Ronnie, I think you've probably seen this, where a Google Chrome browser extension will get compromised somehow and start sending data back to a Chinese server or whatever, and it'll turn out that some regular person wrote an extension, and then a shady company comes in and buys that extension from them and then pumps malware into it, and it rolls out to people's computers. So that's an attack vector we've seen repeatedly over the last 6 months. And so Google is finally stepping in and saying, look, when you install an extension right now, it can have access to as much as you want. When you install uBlock Origin, for example, the very first thing it does is says, hey, am I allowed to have total access to everything you see? And we say yes, because it needs to see everything, so it can say, oh, that's an ad, let me take that out. And that's an ad, let me take that out. And let me put a white block in there instead of a big broken image icon and go like that. So that plugin, we put a lot of trust in the ad blocker that we run, right? The ad blocker technically sees everything. It can stop cookies. It can see cookies, which means it can copy the cookies. Session state and all that can be sent off to nefarious locations. Almost all of those plugins maintain a rule set that's stored on their own servers that could be changed overnight. If a malicious company or if a hacker gets in there, they could change those rules and do all sorts of crazy things. That's a lot of trust to put in some free application that you've downloaded from a random app store, and so what Google's doing is saying, we got to take that away. We can't, people are just too willing to give that access away. And so they're switching to a new API-based system that says, instead of the web browser asking the extension and saying, hey, am I allowed to show this? Instead, the extension has to tell the web browser, hey, here's a list of stuff you're not allowed to access. And that way, the web browser doesn't have to share any information with the extension. There's no risk of that data getting out. And at the same time, it can operate a little faster, which I don't think most people care about because it's already pretty fast, right? But it does make it a lot more secure.
Well, and to take off my web user hat and put on my marketer hat now, it's a good thing from that perspective because a lot less people will be able to opt out of ads that we might show, or we're able to get more tracking information on people that maybe were blocking cookies and things before. So remarketing ads and things will be even more accurate.
Well, and there's a few reasons for that. Like, you use an ad blocker, right? Or no?
I do. Yeah, I turn it off.
A marketer
sometimes.
That uses an ad blocker. Which one do you use?
I test it. I use it to see. What do I use? Ad block.
Ad block.
Yeah.
Okay. I use one that's called Ad Guard. What do you use, Ronnie?
I use the uBlock.
uBlock Origin. uBlock Origin is probably the most popular. I don't remember why I switched to Ad Guard about a year ago, but I did. We'll use uBlock as an example. So the APIs that Google is putting in place to replace what is already there, it kind of sucks. It's not as complete. And the example that I was reading about was that their API says all of the rules have to be embedded in the plugin. The plugins aren't allowed to reach out and get rules from their own server, and they've got to hand them off to the browser. So that's going to slow things down. They won't be able to react as quickly to new domains and things like that popping up. The other thing is they're limited to 30,000 rules. And that sounds like a lot, but uBlock Origin has over 90,000 rules in it right now.
Right.
So already its effectiveness is going to drop by 2/3, just overnight when this system comes into place. So we'll see what happens in the future, how they're able to overcome that and see if they can kind of keep up with it. In the meantime, browser extensions aren't the only way to filter your internet access. There's still plenty of DNS servers that do filtering. You can override your host file. There's VPN services that allow you to basically filter the network connection instead of filtering a single application. All of those will still work just fine. This is just what's embedded inside of Google Chrome.
And I will say, in my defense as a marketer, I only installed that for this podcast so that when I do show my screen on here, it's not just full of ads. But I have disabled it on a lot of sites just because of the guilt trip. Like you'll get, they'll show you pictures of starving journalists and say, these guys aren't making any money when you're blocking our ads for our free content. And I get that. That's true. So.
Yeah. On this story as well, I've looked up a couple of different articles, not for the show, but earlier this week. As I was reading about it, some of them were saying, hey, it's not that it's not good, but they said, how is it that Google's picking which ad blockers to actually kind of, run this again, So I think uBlock Origin, for one reason or another, is the biggest, partner with Google. And so their stuff is not getting, they're essentially allowing you, Block Origin, to kind of do what they want to do, at least from what I'm reading. But other ones, they're saying, well, no, you're going to follow this rule. So it looks like that there's two sets of rules there for different ones that are out there.
Yeah, and that's not unheard of.
Yeah.
We had something like this happen in Android a while back where Google said applications are no longer allowed to use accessibility services unless it's to actually help somebody who's disabled. And there were all these password managers that were using accessibility services to type in passwords. And so then Google made some exceptions, like, it was okay for LastPass to do it, and was it KeePass or 1Password, one of the other ones. And that was it. They didn't approve all the other password managers, just those couple. And they've had to backtrack on that a bit. So it's not unheard of for Google to have a double standard on stuff.
Yeah, it's just kind of an interesting take, when you start reading about this, people easily get frustrated when they see that and like, well, you're not blocking this one, but you're blocking the one that I love, to use because it's been so effective.
Yeah.
So it looks like that they're almost driving business towards the other one that, that they don't want to use.
Yeah.
Well, it's only a proposal at this point, right? Or is it?
I thought they were rolling it out in one of the Canary builds.
Okay.
Yeah. Manifest.
Because the headline is Google proposes changes to Chromium browser.
No, so it is at the proposal stage. Yeah, it'll come into the they call it the Canary builds. That's where they test new stuff. So it'll come into that first. This type of change, even if they greenlight it right now, would probably be 6 months out. But I know another area where people are concerned is that Chromium is the basis for Google Chrome, but it's also the basis for Microsoft Edge now. And so this is a change that would affect multiple browsers, not just Chrome.
Yeah. All right, well, let's shift gears now to another story that I understand as much as DNS Flag Day until Don explains it. This one's over on Tom's Hardware. PCIe 5.0 is ready for prime time, and boy, I'm excited. It's ready. So let's install it. Or
so
go to it.
All right. So most people don't upgrade their computers anymore, as far as like components inside of it. Video cards are kind of the exception for that, and people still want to have the best video card they can. And if you're a hardcore gamer or whatever, you're probably getting a new video card once a year or every other year at least, more often than upgrading a computer. And the PCIe slot that those cards plug into is kind of the bottleneck. It's only got so much bandwidth on it, especially if you're doing higher order things like SLI or interleaved video cards and all that other good stuff. So the newest version of PCIe or PCI Express is basically standardized now. And what they're saying is that the new standard, it doubles the throughput for PCIe 4.0, yielding a data rate of 32 giga. What are GTs?
I don't know.
That
was just terabit. Yeah, something.
Grand touring.
That's the first time I've seen that one.
So, the chart down here. If we pull up the chart, this one's in gigabytes, which we all understand.
Yeah, that's
so. Our bandwidth in gigabytes per second, and they're kind of showing the timeline here. This is why I picked the article from Tom's Hardware, because a lot of people were reporting on this, but they had this cool chart that just shows over the years, right? When PCI was first created, PCI interfaces. It was operating at 0.13 gigabytes per second, or 130 megs per second. And then it slowly increased, usually doubling as it goes along. And then all of a sudden, we're seeing this huge increase now as we jump up to these higher numbers to what we've got with PCI Express or PCIe 5.0, now operating at 128 gigabytes per second. That's a lot of data moving pretty fast.
Now, I watched every episode of the IT Fundamentals course that the two of you participated in. Did we cover PCIe and I just missed that show?
We should have, yeah. That would have been in the PC components.
Oh, right. That was hour 30. I forgot about that.
It is the standard interface for adapter cards these days. You used to have ISA and what were some of the other ones? AGP, is that the video card
AGP
ports?
for the video, yep.
Which really were PCI ports, right? They were just
accelerated.
Special. Yeah.
So the E is Express, you said?
Yes.
Express.
Okay. Yep. Which is fast.
But why is it not capitalized?
It was to distinguish it from the regular PCI.
Yeah. Why is anything?
Yeah.
So many questions. We'll get to the bottom of next week.
You're just lucky it's not an emoji, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
That's coming up probably.
PCI poop? What is this about?
All right. Well, if you're doing a build out on a new computer, if you're wanting to fire up some of those brand new shiny NVIDIA 2060 cards that cost $1,000, Well, they're still not PCIe 5.0 compliant, so you want to hold off. But next year, this will probably be a bigger deal if you're doing build-outs. You can get some real performance out of it.
And you'll probably want a hard drive on that computer you're building out.
More than
which
likely.
brings us to our next story over on Backblaze. Backblaze.com. The Backblaze hard drive stats for 2018. And I'm sorry, I just like saying Backblaze again and again. So
It's kind of a cool name.
it's a fun name.
You know, it's like an American Gladiator name. Like right now, it's the Destroyer versus Backblaze.
Well, there was an American Gladiator named Blaze, I believe. So that's where you're
All right.
probably
Maybe that's the
reminding you of something from your
It
childhood.
makes me think of barbecue. I don't know why.
Backblaze.
Oh, Backblaze. Oh, like
Yeah.
back ribs? maybe
Yeah,
back
something
ribs?
like that. Yeah.
Well,
I
it's
know,
not.
Yeah.
I had a Big Green Egg smoker.
Oh, you got
and
those.
I had one. I actually
Oh.
gave it to Nate. But I opened the lid too fast once and got a backdraft
Oh.
and lost my
Got
left
flamed?
eyebrow for a week.
Got flamed?
So does that count?
I didn't realize you could do that's a front
Sure.
blaze.
Yeah.
Front blaze. All right, so what's going on with this? We've got 2018 annualized hard drive failure rates. So
All
this
right,
is
so-
by manufacturer?
Backblaze. They are a backup company, right? So they offer unlimited backup storage for an insanely low price. I'm not trying to market for them. I actually have no clue how their business model works because it's like $10 a month and you can put terabytes of data in their system. They should be out of business. I don't understand how they stay around, but they provide great service. And if you want backups, you know, they're wonderful about it. Well, because of the sheer amount of data they store, they have better insight to how hard drives perform than anybody else. You know, when Seagate comes and tells you, hey, our hard drives have a mean time between failure of 3 years. Can you believe Seagate when they're promoting their own drive, right? It behooves them to give you the best number possible.
Not according to this chart.
Backblaze doesn't care, right? They use hard drives from a number of vendors. So they take they have massive amounts of data. And they, here it is, with 100,000 plus hard drives. That's a lot of hard drives. And every year they do a report that puts together the statistics on what their failure rates were. And so you kind of get an idea of who's making the good stuff, who's making the bad stuff. And sometimes it's not so much a matter of who, it's a matter of the densities, right? Like when a brand new high density drive comes out, it usually has a higher failure rate until it's had time to stabilize. And so as we look at this, you'll see some that kind of jump out. You know, Seagate is certainly taking a hit, but Western Digital's in here as well. Always keep an eye out. Like this very first hard drive here from HGST has a 1.58% failure rate. That's kind of bad compared to some of the other numbers, but notice they only had 50 of those drives. They didn't have a lot of those.
That's one failure is
And-
what did that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty low versus some of these other ones like the Seagate ST4000s that they have over 23,000 of those
amazing.
drives, right? That's a lot. And to have a 2.13% failure rate, 581 failures, that's pretty
Not great. Yeah.
It's statistically significant, right? But it's not that great, right? Because that means 22,500 or some odd drives didn't fail.
Yeah, I was told there would not be math on the Technado
I
this
know,
week.
I totally screwed up the math portion of this.
So the question is, why do they have 23,000 of those drives if they fail at the highest percent? Well, actually, the Toshiba one at the bottom fails at the highest percent.
Yeah, and if you look at that
3%.
Toshiba one, look at the density, 14 terabytes, right? So 14 terabyte drives are fairly new. They've got a lot of platters in them. Until they get the platter count down, they'll be unstable like that. And a 3% failure rate, that is absolutely significant.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've got and Toshiba has a 0% earlier for the 5 terabyte one that they've got. So you've got there's not one brand where you say that brand is horrible or that brand is great.
On that Toshiba, they only had 45 of those drives.
That's
so pretty low count.
Yeah.
You can see which ones Backblaze either trust a lot or got a really good deal on. It was like a Black Friday sale on the Seagate model.
Apparently, and the next highest one. Oh yeah, they've got 31,000 of Seagate down at the bottom, and then 14,000 of another Seagate. So they've got a lot of those. But
Now, Ronnie, do you have a brand you prefer?
I like the Western Digital drives.
All right. I was starting to think that I was in my own little shop.
Yeah.
I've been a Western Digital fan for a long, long time. I don't know if they still necessarily earn that trust. And with SSDs, I pretty much am buying Samsung. Backblaze, the surprising thing about this, I really expected them to start reporting on SSDs. they're still doing everything on spinning disk, and that's because they're worried about quantity, not performance. And you get higher quantities with those spinning disks right now.
My favorite brand, not that you asked, is the one that they give away free at trade shows, at booths. So.
Yeah, so it would be like Taichung.
It's Eastern Digital. I don't know.
Eastern Digital.
Southwestern Digital.
I think the capacity on those are a bit smaller too.
Yeah, it's
4 gigs.
yeah,
Maybe.
4 gigs. All right, let's.
It's labeled 4 gigs, but when you really try to run it, it's like 64
You
megs.
open it up, you're like, why would this file fit?
The rest of the room's taken up by the rootkit.
Fair point. Well, I'm on your network, so
Good point.
the joke's on you. All right, let's go over to computerworld.com, where we're seeing what Woody on Windows has to say this week. Microsoft starts its phased rollout of Windows 10 1809, now controlled by a next-generation machine learning model. So this is a rollout to the public or
Yep.
in a beta?
So we've reported on this one a couple of times because of the just absolutely botched rollout of the 1809 updates. Back in October, Microsoft had the Ignite conference, or September, October.
It was around then.
Yeah, whenever Ignite was. They announced the new Windows Server 2019 and Windows 10 update that were the 1809 releases. They promptly pulled the downloads offline because they were deleting files. Like when you would upgrade, it would erase your, I think it was the entire downloads folder or something like that. And then they started having some problems where it would go into boot loops on systems that had Intel chipsets or whatever. So just numerous problems. Well, finally, this week, they've overcome all that, and now it's back for general availability. In fact, there's a rolling update going on right now. So if you've been totally ignoring this story, you'll likely be picking up the 1809 update over the course of the next week, and your machine will update. They had to put a whole, this kills me to say, next generation machine learning model, which just means they put a stupid script in there to see if you have stuff in your downloads folder. And so they've kind of overcome this to be able to make sure it can install without wiping out your junk.
And my favorite part of the article is the first line where they call it the September, October, November, December 2018 update.
That's happening in 2019.
It's now in January. Yeah, he didn't know how to get that January 2019 in there, but yeah, it wasn't originally called the October update, and now we're just like, let's go ahead by the number.
I'm kind of frustrated by their naming convention of this stuff, because it was the creators update and the Redstone, or they're all called Redstone now while they're in secret. They need to come up with a better name for these things. Would it kill them to just say like R2, R3, R4? At least we would understand.
Well, we'll I'm sure be reporting next week on the rollback of this, and we'll see how this continues to go for months and months to come. All right, let's go over to the Register now, biting the hand that feeds IT. The register.co.uk. Want to spin up Ubuntu VMs from Windows 10's command line, eh? We'll need to see a multipass. Is this written in Canada?
I know the headline's a little bizarre. It's a UK site.
Yeah, I
but
guess so.
But they invented the language.
Yeah. So what's this all about now?
All right. So we've talked about the Windows subsystem for Linux, or WSL, a couple of times. I really like it. I use it on my computer at home all the time. So you can be running Windows, but you can launch a Linux command line and have access to all the GNU tools. It's a really, really fancy thing. Well, the thing about it is the deep, dark secret of WSL is that it doesn't actually run the Linux kernel. It's really just abstracting all of your commands into API calls that run on the Windows kernel underneath. So you're not even really running Linux. It's really just like the GNU toolset that you're running. Well, sometimes you really need Linux. Sometimes you actually need the Linux kernel running, which WSL won't do for you. So there's a new service out as an extension of Ubuntu's partnership with Microsoft called Multipass. And what Multipass does is from the command line, you can quickly launch Ubuntu instances that are command line instances, and they're actually being backed by Hyper-V. So, Hyper-V is included with Windows 10 now, as well as Windows Server. It's been a Windows Server for a long time. And so it will spin up Ubuntu instances in the background that you don't see and drop you into a command line and let you work. And now you're sitting on top of a real Linux kernel. It's actually a real deployment of Ubuntu. So any compatibility or inconsistencies you might have had, like the ability to say inconsistency, anything like that with WSL wouldn't be present here in Multipass. So that's a new thing, and it's another fruit of the partnership between Microsoft and Canonical.
And so to clarify, multipass is not what gets you to the front of the line on Space Mountain?
No. Nor is this what gets you to the front of the line at the airport to
Okay.
go through the nudie scanners.
You got
I just
that now,
remember
though,
it from
right?
that old movie, Fifth Element, the multipass.
Oh, yeah.
We showed
Oh,
it. Yeah.
You're right.
good old Fifth Element.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with that
I know.
either, I don't think.
Yeah.
In this case. But
But it
maybe
might.
that's why they named it that.
Yeah.
So anyhow, if you are one of those people that needs to run something on Linux and you're on a Windows machine, check out Multipass. It is experimental right now. It's part of that new update that has a really crazy release number 14 something or another, which is totally not in this article. But down at the bottom, they've got the link here that Canonical is planning a public beta for Windows 10 to be released later in 2019. So it's coming soon. Keep an eye out for it.
All right, sounds good. Well, I mentioned at the top that we didn't have a lot on security this week, but there were a couple of things, of course. So let's go ahead and get to that. The first one over at Naked Security by Sophos. Change your password. VoIP provider leaves huge database exposed online. So just the latest people to give my password out here was
Yeah.
a VoIP provider?
Well, so whenever I see a headline like this, the first thing I think is, oh, great, is this somebody we've used? And we use VoIP providers. Actually, most of our stuff these days is on Office 365's Cloud PBX. But before, we've used other providers, people like Bandwidth.com and even Asterisk. We've set up our own PBX for phone calls here at the office. But in the early days of ITProTV, and when I say the early days, I mean like the first couple of weeks this was even a company, we used a provider, or we tested a provider called VoIPO. And when I saw this breach and started reading it, sure enough, it turned out to be VoIPO. We never actually placed a single business call over them, but we did have an account with them. And basically what happened here, this is another instance where they had a database that had tons of call data and text messages.
Oh, jeez.
And it was stored in a wide open location that you wouldn't find it with a Google search, but it was discovered by web crawlers. It pulled up in the Shodan search engine, and that means all of the data inside of it was exposed, including user account information, phone numbers, phone call history, text messages, and the contents of the text messages too. Like all of that was in this database, massive database, and they did it themselves. They just posted it in a way that was not secure, and it got out.
Yeah, so I don't even know what the takeaway is from that besides don't.
If you use VoIPO, you need to change your password, but also VoIPO is kind of known for being inexpensive. So you get what you pay for. If you go with somebody like Ring Central where it's really expensive, they actually take the time to make sure the data is secure and protected.
Yeah, I guess one takeaway would be if you do work at VoIPO, to check out ITPro.tv for our security content, and don't let that kind of thing happen again. That's not great.
Yeah.
All right, let's head over to the flamingspork.com. The hard-hitting news is this one came from Don. So
most of these articles come from my various RSS feeds that I follow, and
one of them being the
one
Flaming
of them
Spork.
is the Flaming Spork.
All right, the CVE 2019-6260, gaining control of BMC from the host processor. And I'm very happy to say that later on in this article, they do offer a better name than the CVE 2019-6260, which is the Pants Down. Which that's a great name for an attack. What is this? A malware? Is this a vulnerability?
Now it's been exploited, so it's a full blown exploit.
Okay, so the Pants Down exploit. How do I make sure, besides suspenders, that I am covered against
All
this?
right, so this one targets the BMC, which is the baseboard management controller, which is a big deal. So most servers, when you buy an HP or a Dell or even a Supermicro or something like that, will typically have a BMC on it that allows you to do the remote management. Compaq and HP, they call theirs the Insight Lights Out or ILO boards. Dell calls theirs DRAX or Dell Remote Access Cards. Supermicro does the IPMI, which is a little bit more of an open standard, but they all work the same way. They all have these controllers that allow you to see what's on the screen of the server remotely, power it off, power it on. You can even put virtual media in the drive. Imagine if an attacker could take over the BMC. At that point, it would be the equivalent of them sitting right in front of the server with full physical access. That's effectively what they would have, except they would be remote. So you wouldn't notice, like, hey, why is that guy standing in my server room? That piece would be missing. So this is really bad. And what you're supposed to do when you deploy a BMC like this is to have it in a out-of-band network, a network that's not reachable from the internet or whatever. But as we saw in the big CenturyLink outage the other week, a lot of times those management networks aren't as isolated as they're supposed to be. And if an attacker can get in, that's a problem. The other thing is most people don't think about their BMCs. They deploy a server and they never update them. So the big moral of this story is if you have ILO boards, DRACs, IPMIs, make sure you're updating them. Firmware releases have already been pushed out to fix this. It's an easy fix. You don't even have to take your server offline in most cases because it's the BMC that reboots, not the actual system. So definitely get these updates out there. Flaming Spork does a great job of running through how the exploit works and explains each of the various pieces in there. And they identify a couple of the affected systems so that you know what to look for. There's a lot of stuff in there. It's a really good read that runs through it all. But this is a pretty big deal. You certainly need to protect your management network, and the BMC is a big part of that.
So when you say it's like having direct access sitting in front of the computer, if I happen to be at that computer and have a monitor on it, I would see the mouse moving and things, or
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
So
But
it's like remote desktop.
You would have to have a monitor on it though.
Sure,
Most
which
server
you
rooms don't
yeah.
do that.
But if you happen to be toggling through or looking at the different
Yeah.
servers, you would physically see something. All right, well that's definitely something to check out. I'm trying to figure out what city is in the header image there on the Flaming Spork.
Is that Paris?
No.
Is it? Oh, the bridge is so close together, it gives you a
And on his
sense.
contact page, he doesn't even have a city.
Uh,
Shoot. Man, all right. Well, if you know,
That
please write
mystery.
into wherever you write into for this show. Do we have an email address?
Sure.
Okay. info@technado.com.
Pretty certain we have that, don't we? We definitely have interview at technado.com
Do we?
because that's where I ask people to email us if they want to do an interview for the show.
Would,
Which, for the record, hey, if any of you guys want to do an interview on Technado, be sure
how
to
many emails
email.
have you gotten? We want to make sure the account's actually set up.
Oh, no, that one
Okay,
I know
that'll
works.
work. All right.
Because we actually use it. Angie and I use it.
There you go. So email that and just say, that's Boston or whatever it is. That'd be great. All right, let's head over to our final article and the one that's going to make you think a little bit. This is at theindependent.co.uk. China launches app encouraging users to identify and report deadbeat debtors. So I've looked into this a little bit, and basically you've got, I think they said it's built into Weibo, which is the big social network in China, but basically it's letting you know if someone is around you that is considered a deadbeat debtor, so someone that they believe has the resources to pay them back and just has not. And it's basically encouraging you to keep an eye out for that person and see, hey, are they getting into a fancy car? Are they coming out of a nice store and looking like they can afford to pay back? And let's snap some photos and send it in, I guess. And
Yeah, it has a whole system in there
report
where
your
you can
friends.
report the person. And, we see stuff like this in the U.S. where you have people doing insurance fraud, right? They say they were injured at work and they can't walk, but then they're jogging around their neighborhood. Well, here it's debt. And it's interesting because when I first saw this, I just assumed some company had made it, somebody like Cambridge Analytica or somebody like that. But then when you read, this actually came from the Higher People's Court. Like the actual court system released this so you can spot broke people near you.
within 500 meters. I mean, that's pretty good
Pretty
distance.
good distance, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what information it gives you, like if it shows you a picture of the person or something, because if, you're at the mall and it's, I've got 10 deadbeat debtors around, how do I identify them? I hope this is
You
something
keep
we can
walking
get here.
towards them. It looks like a little radar screen
I
there.
guess so, yeah. There's a nice little radar screen that you can use, but everyone in those pictures looks the same to me.
Yeah.
So hopefully there's
You
some
are
more
so
information.
racially
I
insensitive.
don't think I am in this case. Well, I am, but not because of that. Let's say that.
For those of you who are listening and not watching, the pictures are all literally
They are all
identical.
the same. Yeah, they are just little
But
emoticons.
in Ronnie's defense, though, like if you look, these are streets in here.
Yeah.
It's pixelating when I zoom in too much. So if you had two people in the same block, they would overlap. How would you identify them? But it is an interesting concept.
Wait, if they know where they are,
Couldn't they just go
why
and
don't
get
they
them?
just go and go, hey, you owe us some money?
Well, I guess maybe the primary purpose of this is to report them doing something they're not supposed to do.
So maybe we already know they exist. They've said they're going to try to pay back when they can, but now we see that.
But they're obviously eating at a 4-star
right
restaurant or
when
something.
they're at Starbucks and they're buying a coffee for $6 or
whatever it is.
I was trying to localize the currency, but I actually don't know what the currency in China is. It's yen in Japan, right? Not in China.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, shows how culturally.
Yeah. What were you
Aware,
saying about
yeah.
me, by the way? I'm culturally insensitive. Well, yeah. It looks like debt is a big problem in that area, and so is people just deciding not to pay it back. So, if we did that for college debt and student loans in America, your phone would just blow up.
Yeah.
This right here would be a court case in a
Yeah.
heartbeat in the
Oh,
United
yeah,
States.
this-
This would
This
fly.
would be taken down immediately, but it's still still fun. Now I feel like planning a trip and just to get to play with this app. Well,
It would make me stay at home. I would go anywhere.
yeah. But I wonder if it's like, yeah, he lives next door to me. So now you're just knocking on the door. Right?
I mean, they,
How big's
they
your
have
TV?
to actually. I mean, they have to have some type of tracking system on the deadbeat debtor.
Well, they're deadbeats, but apparently they can still afford a cell
cell
phone, would
phone?
be my guess. Yeah.
Well, that's a basic human right at this point, isn't it? And it's got to be the iPhone 10.
Of course.
Basic human rights.
Got to get it around that embargo.
Come on. All right. Well, we've got a great interview here that just Don and I were on. I'm sorry about that, Ronnie. We
It's all right.
didn't invite you to that, but it's with Shekhar over at Clairvoyant, and they're a data security company. Don, can you give us a little background going into this in terms of what it is Clairvoyant does?
You know, I'm almost going to sound sarcastic when I say this, but they use machine learning and artificial intelligence to do advanced threat detection. And I know it sounds funny, but I can guarantee you we will hear all of those words. But basically, they give you insight into your network and help locate threats. They got a really neat system, so it'd be cool to talk to them.
Yeah, and we've talked about coming up with the buzzword bingo, and really missed the boat on not doing it before this interview, unfortunately. But
I think we would endanger people's lives through alcoholism
Yeah.
if we did the buzzword
well, it doesn't
bingo.
have to be a drinking game necessarily.
Oh,
Don.
it does.
Not all of us have to drink to have fun. But let's go ahead and shift gears now. Take a look at that interview right after this here on Technado.
I'm James Packer. I'm the General Manager of Kirk ISS based in the Cayman Islands. I used ITProTV extensively in my last place. It grew very well, helped upskill the team. I had 110 engineers in the field and we had dozens of IT Pro accounts with the guys training, and last year alone they passed over 40 certs by using the online training. I think I can safely say without ITProTV I wouldn't be where I was today, because I only got this job on the back of the qualifications I have.
All right, welcome back to Technado, and we're joined now by Shekhar from Clairvoyant, all the way from Arizona. Shekhar, how you doing today?
Good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here, and want to learn a little bit more. So those of us that maybe haven't heard about Clairvoyant, I know you're an IT consulting company, but that can mean a lot of things. So tell us a little bit about what Clairvoyant does.
Yeah, so we are a data analytics and consulting company. We help our customers essentially realize value from their data assets, and right from help them along their journey of realizing this value. Most people, associate data-driven problems, data-driven solutions with just the last mile, what we call the last mile engineering, or the last mile problems, which is mostly around machine learning or artificial intelligence built to deliver these things. We help our customers along the entire journey of data acquisition, building out a data strategy, implementing these data management platforms, and then towards the end also help them with building predictive analytics solutions using machine learning and AI on top of that. So we are slightly different from a bunch of other companies in the sense that we provide that end-to-end support as opposed to just the last mile stuff.
Are there specific industries you work with, or sizes of companies? Like who's kind of your ideal client?
So we're more horizontal focused, at least when we started off. But over the last couple of years, we've been gravitating towards more healthcare and financial services, and with some of our clients who are in the education and higher ed and retail space. Mostly large to mid to large enterprises, but we also work with a couple of startups who have some deep technology and data-related problems.
So you're the CTO there. So what is your day-to-day? Where are you fitting in? Are you working directly with clients, or kind of helping with your team internally?
Wear a couple of hats. A lot of time definitely spent on working with clients, both in the initial phases of some of these engagements in terms of help define and kick these things off, see them through implementation, make sure that actually stuff lands in production, it works, delivers the value that we promised, but also at the same time internally working with the team on driving these technology choices, driving these both for current engagements, but also for the future. What should we be looking forward to invest in so that we can stay ahead of the game?
Now, I know I'm always fascinated to learn about the type of work that people are doing, because IT is such a big career field and there's so many different things. But your company in particular, you mentioned really three of the big industry buzzwords right now, which is machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data. I mean, it's like a press release gone wild. So some of it is really well defined. Like we know what big data is. You mentioned hospitals. They have tons and tons of data, and they've got to be able to sift through that. But when we get into machine learning and artificial intelligence, that starts to become a little more vague. A lot of companies define that a different way. So for you guys, what is an example of like a machine learning project, or the types of machine learning that you work with? Kind of how do you guys define that?
Great question. I think everybody could definitely use a lot of clarification there. So without going into too much of the hype associated with AI, but the key aspects, I think the transition that we are going through, especially as more and more of the business process and automation, implementation, digitization of everything has happened within enterprises over the last decade and a half or more. There's huge amounts of data that's starting to get generated and captured, both on internal business processes, but also in customer interactions and other aspects of the customer journey that businesses typically have. Where we come into play is essentially in the transition where most enterprises are still leveraging this data to do very reactive analytics, being able to say, okay, explain what happened, as opposed to getting into the stage where we can almost predict what happened. So while that sounds broad, but diving in a little bit more, it's the from a machine learning perspective, where we find ourselves helping clients the most is on two levels. One, the 80% of the work, which is all around the data management and making sure that high quality data is staged and ready for usage, whether it's for BI reporting, but then more importantly, translate that into a set of processes and implementations that can predict some event. So as an example, one of our very first products that we built was all around predicting risk of a student falling out of class, right, or not passing the class with a successful grade. So we used a lot of signals, both from their their social attributes, the posts that they are making in their classroom and coursework, and also some of their homework assignments, did sentiment analysis on some of these things, and essentially came up with a risk score that predicted whether a student was on track to finish the course and hence pass, or if they're at risk of dropout because they're not as engaged, or they're showing signs of struggling, they're not able to keep up with work, especially along the way of as class sizes increases. This was a huge problem for a lot of our customers. So that's an example. Another example is we talked about healthcare. We're working with a couple of our potential clients, on specifically making predictions on when a patient would be readmitted to a hospital, right? So if you've gone through some treatment but if you're not following up in terms of taking preventive care, what is the risk score associated with the patient showing up back into at the provider within 30 days of being discharged? So various ends of the spectrum, but essentially moving our clients from asking questions in a reactive fashion to more of a predictive fashion.
You know, a few months ago, we did an interview with a company called Gravwell, and they actually make a big data product that lets you take large amounts of data and sift through it. The way their solution worked was if they went to a hospital or somewhere, they could take the hospital's data, put it in their system, and then answer all sorts of questions. For you guys, is that kind of how you work as well, or are you actually able to work with the data in the client's systems already? So, for example, let's say they've got a massive Oracle database that has all that information. Do you work in their environment, or do you bring the data into something else?
Yeah, so we pretty much, especially for regulated industries where data privacy is a huge concern, we more often than not find ourselves working within the firewall of the client themselves, because moving data out of that ecosystem can be a big no. While we have a set of repeatable processes, approaches, and patterns, but they pretty much do get implemented within the client's environment. So we don't have to move any of their data assets out of their ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a really valuable thing, and you hit it right on the head talking about regulation, because we always have to worry about that with data privacy. Now, having to work with data in place at a client like that can actually be really challenging. So I'll put you on the spot here. What is like your dream come true when you connect with a new client and they come in and they say, hey, we've got all this data and it just happens to be stored in whatever format? Like, what is the easiest format for you guys to manipulate?
So I think there's two aspects to that. There's definitely the format piece, which is, how is it stored in a relational store, or is it stored in like a data lake or big data ecosystem like Hadoop? And I'll shed a little bit more light on that. But there's also this other piece of, is it all in one place? The bigger hurdle that we run into almost on a daily basis is a lot of our customers, and this is true of most enterprises, they're still only so far along the journey of getting all of their data in one place so that they can actually then power decisions, not just based off of what one system is capturing, but across an entire customer 360 or across an entire customer's life cycle. One of the key things that we found as we were implementing some of these use cases was, in one example, proximity to a pharmacy was a big indicator of whether or not you adhered to your medication, right? So now that typically is mostly public data, right? So you have to bring a lot of public data, get locations of pharmacy based off of zip code, do some munging and get that in. But more often than not, we don't find a place where we can store it and combine it with the rest of the enterprise data. So, so while I would love such that most people have a data lake or an equivalent system already in place, but the bigger thing which takes longer lead time or effort is centralizing all that data in one place for consumption.
I'm kind of surprised that you mentioned that most places already have a data lake in place, because when I look at hospitals, I don't think cutting edge data storage.
No, I think a lot of people are still very early in that journey. It's not the case yet. There's more and more data warehouses that we keep running into, but that it's still a fraction of the data asset that they have internally. But as you span industries, it's 5 years ago, 6 years ago when we started, this was more of a rarity. But now at least folks have some efforts or projects in place to make this happen. Still early days, but yeah.
What's the worst case scenario? Like the data is still stored on paper?
Great question. Well, so that is definitely a fairly interesting situation to walk into. Although you'll be surprised, we did deal with that in a couple of instances. So it wasn't paper per se, but a lot of like scanned documents, right? But a lot of it handwritten, some tabular structured printout stuff. So we had to go through the process of using OCR and computer vision approaches, essentially extract all the text and extract a lot of the structured data out of these files, and then translate it into a database and then make it work. So there's ways around that, but of course it does take much longer.
So HIPAA is obviously something we've been dealing with for years and years. GDPR is something I see on your website as well. Has that changed your business in the last year or two in terms of getting ready for that and the challenges now that that's out there?
Yeah, great question. So we've, independent of some of the regulatory frameworks that are being launched, that have been announced and rolled out over the last couple of years, GDPR being one of them, the California Data Privacy Act being one of them. Even before these became more formal, as we worked with a lot of the data that our clients have, one of the things that became fairly obvious to us, this was two and a half years ago, was as difficult as enterprises find it to manage their data from a storage perspective. The real other problem that they also have, which is even more dangerous in some situations, is they just don't have a systemic way of knowing what data is where, right? So from a data catalog or governance perspective, historically, most companies have been doing this in a very manual fashion. So there'll be a couple of teams, whether they're internal audit or architects, who will be responsible for cataloging all this data. But in this day and age where data is getting created at breakneck speed, you're always falling behind in your ability to keep up, right? So you're dealing with the data fire hose, both in terms of the volume but also the variety. So when we realized that, and we're talking with a couple of our customers, we identified the need to build this automated catalog, make this more of a systemic process as opposed to a manual documentation driven process. So that's where and a large part of GDPR mandates that you have this catalog. And that's when we launched one of our recent products, Cagney, Cagney.io. So I encourage the listeners to go check it out. Helps with the exact exact problem of data privacy, governance, cataloging, managing sensitive data. So we've seen a huge awareness come about this, but still, again, very early days in terms of companies implementing processes for complying with these regulations.
All right, we're talking with Shekhar from Clairvoyant, and you did a great segue there for me, because I was going to ask you, I know we talked ahead of the interview about kind of the setup, and you've got Clairvoyant, you guys do the consulting, and then you have some products separately, and I wasn't sure a moment ago if we were talking about the things that the products do or the things that Clairvoyant does. So help us kind of understand that, and tell us about this new product, Cagney, that's out.
Great. Yeah, sure thing. Pretty much when we started the company, our vision was enabling help enabling enterprises get value out of data, right? So and since day one, we've been focused on building. While we haven't gone down the route of getting more traditional startups where you have a product concept, you're going down the route of VC funding. We were a self-bootstrapped company, so we've been working on products ever since. Now, the way we are set up is, so we have the four of us co-founders. We manage various parts of the company. And along the way, as we learn of some problems that our customers are facing, as we see where the market is headed, we've always taken some time to look back and see how, in addition to our consultative practices, how we can enable both our company, but also our enterprise, our customers, to get value in a quicker fashion, which translates into solutions and products that can be deployed and up and running within a matter of hours and days, as opposed to projects that take weeks and months. So that's where our DNA has been since day one, to take a look at problems in a product-oriented fashion. And that's how we've been set up. So Cagney is the latest realization of that vision.
So can you kind of walk us through a use case for Cagney, a problem that a company
Sure.
might have, and how they could fit that in, and what it would be doing to help?
Absolutely. So the sweet spot is any company that is rich and flush with data assets, has data spread across multiple systems. We see this every day, where databases and data systems are siloed in nature. There's legacy systems, RDBMSs, file stores, email servers, archives, to NoSQL databases, data lakes, even cloud-based data storage systems. So an enterprise that has a rich variety of both data assets and also data management systems, and also deals with a lot of customer data, sensitive data, which is where the higher risk and regulatory framework comes into play. So we help customers essentially, as a step one, get a lay of the land. So once Cagney is deployed, you're able to quickly catalog your entire ecosystem, and we start displaying dashboards of what data exists where. So what used to take weeks and months of manual data collection before can now be done in a matter of hours. And then after that, we then help them secure that data so that they can then protect it and help prevent data breaches or help prevent leakage of sensitive data. So that's essentially the sweet spot of what Cagney operates with.
Now, I understand the product, it catalogs your data, which is largely stored in databases, but might be in flat files or something as well.
Yeah.
So it catalogs what you know about, and then is it able to find data you don't know about? Like, if there's excess data stored in a file store somewhere?
Absolutely. Yeah. So both on file stores and within the enterprise, but also one new trend is the popularity of object stores in the cloud, like S3, blob storage, things like that. So what we've seen is these file stores, file shares, they make it so easy to just store files and data. As an example, one of our customers, they didn't realize this, but they were storing a lot of ID, proof of ID, whether it's a driver's license or a passport images within one of these file stores. To most other systems, they're just binary files. You can't make out one image from the other. But we actually have a machine learning based feature that we built into the product that's able to not just say that this is an image, but also say what specific type of image it is. So we can introspect on a deeper level than just looking at structured data.
And can that be customized based on the industry? So, for example, I used to work for a bank, and yeah, we had things like social security numbers. We knew to scan for those and identify that they follow a certain format. But we had certain mortgage documents and other things that were really just specific to our bank. So, it's not some kind of standard format. Can it be customized to identify things like that?
Absolutely. Great question. Because as much as we know about, what the key data, especially sensitive data elements are, we quickly realized both from an IP perspective and for various other reasons, other companies have confidential data that goes beyond just standard data sets or attributes. So what we added in was a mechanism to essentially train the system with a few examples so that it can identify unseen elements and then be taught to tag them and catalog them wherever it sees it across the ecosystem. So yeah, absolutely.
So is the customer going in and tagging the data that's sensitive, or is Cagney actually scanning through and identifying sensitive information versus just other information?
It's all automatic, so you can guide it along the way to help make it better. But it's all automatic. It is scanning the ecosystem and then finding these data sets and cataloging them.
Now, you're one of the co-founders of Clairvoyant, and obviously, big data, machine learning, these are all big spaces that are very active right now. But what made you guys want to get into this space? Do you have a background in this area, or did you just identify a need? What was that story?
A bit of both. So a couple of us, when we were working with over the last couple of years at our previous employer, that's when we first got exposed to the power of data. Both a lot of us worked on personalized learning. That's our background was higher education. So how do we tailor content and recommend the right interventions, the right content to a student at the right time, and surface that up. We had to do that in a data-driven fashion, capture all kinds of stuff and surface these things up. Another thing that we closely worked with was at scale, being able to see student behavior and then again identify some risk patterns of various negative events. So this is kind of what got us interested in the whole space, and we quickly realized the amount of impact that delivering one of these use cases can have for a company, and that's what we wanted to replicate for other enterprises as we started Clairvoyant.
Well, it's certainly impressive, and I know it's a need that a lot of companies have. We were talking about the Cagney product, which people can learn more about at kogni.io, cogni.io, and then Clairvoyant is clairvoyantsoft.com. You guys are pretty active in the conference space also, though. You guys got any conferences lined up for 2019?
Yeah, so in addition to the ones that we participate in, speak at, so we do two annual conferences. One, the Phoenix Data Conference, that's usually in the fall of each year. So end of October is when that's lined up for. And we also, over the last 3 years, have been doing one out in our Pune office. This is out in India. We have an office there, and they have one coming up fairly quickly. So those two, and then we'll be attending, hymns, and we'll be also speaking at or presenting and have a booth at Strata this year. So that's where we can talk more.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions that I've got. Did you have any other topics you wanted to hit on before we wrapped up the interview?
No, I think, as we touched upon this, one of the key aspects of along this journey, something that we've realized, so the impact that data can have is immense, but the journey is not an easy one, right? One thing we can't emphasize enough, as much as the focus needs to be on how to implement the fancy machine learning algorithm and other aspects of extracting insights, but can't emphasize enough as to how important it is to have a proper structured data strategy from a data acquisition and data storage and management perspective. That's the one thing we find everybody thinks about. It's almost an afterthought, so just wanted to drive that point home.
Well, thank you so much, Shekhar, for joining us. And can you promise to let us know any new announcements or new products coming out in the future? I know Don and I kind of love to geek out on big data stuff, so we'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. There's one in the works, which hopefully in a couple of months we can talk about more, and maybe even do a sneak peek. So yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your time.
That would be great. Yeah, it'd be cool to look under the hood. So thank you so much for joining us, and to all of you watching, stay tuned. We've got more Technado coming up right after this.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. ITProTV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide, this is important for me to learn. I would recommend ITProTV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
All right, welcome back to Technado, and thank you to Shekhar for joining us all the way from Phoenix, Arizona for that interview. That was very insightful. We're super happy to have him on the show here. But before we let you go, we want to let you know about a couple of things coming up. Don, you have a big webinar coming up next week. Yeah, right at the end of the month, Zach Hill from IT Career Questions and I are going to get up there and do the top 5 IT career questions. So if you're interested in moving into IT, we'll talk about some of the big questions that we get from a number of people that are out there. It'll be a lot of fun. And it's a joint webinar, which we haven't done before. So the odds of me screwing it up would be pretty high. So if you want to watch that, that's another reason to tune in. Yeah, well, I mean, it's more the odds of a technical screw up now. We're bringing in someone remotely, so the pressure's on the guy that's on the other end of these earpieces. Yeah, that's really, true. But we'll see. But if you want to register for that one, head over to itpro.tv/webinars, and you can get registered. It's on Thursday, January 31st at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also, at that site, check out all of our past on-demand webinars, and you can sign up retroactively and be given a link to the YouTube private page there to be able to watch all the webinars we've done in the past on everything from phishing scams and ITIL and AWS. So definitely check that out over at ITProTV. itpro.tv/webinars. Also want to let you know about an offer from ITProTV. If you're interested in, finally following through on that New Year's resolution you made at the beginning of the year, go ahead and head over to go.itpro.tv/Technado. We've got a 7-day free trial for you, as well as a coupon code if you are looking to sign up as an individual. You can also request a demo of ITProTV for your team if you're working in a team, and you've got special pricing and features for those folks as well. So go.itpro.tv/Technado for more information. Well, thank you so much, Ronnie, for joining us today and offering some insight there on the news this week.
Well, thank you for inviting me on the show finally.
We might invite you back.
Maybe.
If you're still...
Assuming the internet still works
That's
after
right.
DNS Flag Day.
That's true, yeah. And happy Flag Day, DNS Flag Day to everyone out there in the Czech Republic and the rest of the world. But thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next week right here on Technado.
Are you enjoying Technado? Then be sure to check out our other podcast, Ask Me Anything, where our subject matter experts answer your questions. Here's the latest episode, and here's the full playlist. And as always, be sure to subscribe to ITProTV's channel.
ITProTV.